$50,000 in savings changes the way your brain processes every single financial decision you make, and not in the way you'd expect. I'm not talking about some motivational, hit your first 50K and feel amazing nonsense. I'm talking about an actual, measurable shift in how you think about risk, how you respond to emergencies, how you spend on a Tuesday afternoon, and how you stop making the desperate moves that keep most people stuck between 30 and 35. And look, if you're sitting there right now with $800 in your savings account, or maybe $2,000 on a good month, this isn't meant to make you feel behind. Most people in their late 20s and early 30s making 60, 70, even 80,000 a year have nowhere near 50K saved. That's not because they're stupid. It's because the distance between 0 and 50,000 is designed to feel impossible. And I'm going to show you exactly why your brain is working against you right now and what flips once you cross that line. If this is the kind of stuff you want to hear more of, real systems, real numbers, none of the just stop buying lattes energy, hit subscribe. This channel is built for people who are smart enough to earn it, but never had someone sit down and explain how to actually keep it. So here's what nobody talks about. There are actual psychological thresholds in personal finance, numbers where your relationship with money fundamentally rewires. The first one most people feel is around $1,000. You go from, I literally cannot handle any surprise, to, okay, if my tire blows out, I'm annoyed but not destroyed. That's real. That matters. The next one people talk about is 10,000, and 10K is nice. It's the first time your savings account doesn't feel like a joke. You open your Chase app and you see 5 figures and something in your chest relaxes a little. But 50,000? 50,000 is where the game changes structurally. And I don't mean that in some Instagram caption way. I mean your actual decision-making architecture shifts. The way you evaluate a job offer changes. The way you respond to a rent increase changes. The way you think about that side project you've been sitting on for 2 years, that changes too. I'll tell you exactly when I felt it. I crossed 50K in savings about 3 years ago, and the thing that surprised me wasn't the number itself. It was that I stopped making panicked financial decisions, like completely. And I didn't realize how many of my normal money moves were actually panic responses until the panic stopped. Let me explain what I mean by panic responses, because I think most people don't recognize them as panic. Staying at a job you hate because you can't afford even 1 month without a paycheck, that's a panic response. Saying yes to a freelance project that pays garbage and eats your weekend because you need the $300, panic response. Keeping a subscription you don't use because canceling it feels like admitting you're broke, honestly, that's a weird one, but it's still operating from scarcity. Not negotiating your rent renewal because you're terrified of the landlord saying, fine, leave, and you know you can't cover first-last security somewhere new, that's the big one. And I'm not judging any of this. I did all of it, every single one, for years. Because when you've got $4,000 in savings and your rent is $1,800, you're always 2 bad weeks away from crisis. Your brain knows that. It's doing math in the background constantly, and the math is telling it to play defense on everything. This is what behavioral economists call scarcity mindset, but I hate that term because it sounds like a diagnosis. It's not a mindset problem, it's a math problem. When the gap between you and financial disaster is small, your brain correctly identifies that the priority is survival. It's not broken, it's doing its job. The problem is that survival mode makes terrible long-term decisions. Let me give you a real example of how this plays out. Say you're making $65,000 a year. After taxes in a state like North Carolina or Texas, you're taking home maybe $4,000 a month, give or take. Rent is $1,500, car payments $350, utilities, insurance, groceries, gas, another $1,200 on a lean month. You've got maybe $900 of breathing room, some months less. With $900 of margin, every unexpected expense is a crisis. The mechanic says your brakes are shot, $600. Your dog needs emergency vet care, $800. Your lease is up and the new place wants first month plus a security deposit. Suddenly you need $3,000 in 2 weeks. When you're living in that math, your brain is in constant threat assessment. You're not thinking about investing. You're not thinking about optimizing. You're thinking about surviving to next Friday's paycheck. And here's the thing. That's not a $25,000 a year problem exclusively. People making $80,000, $90,000, even $100,000 a year live in this exact mode because expenses scale with income, and the gap between I'm fine and I'm in trouble stays razor thin. 7 out of 10 Americans have less than $1,000 in emergency savings. Not because 7 out of 10 Americans are irresponsible, because the system is structured to keep that gap small, between your income and your obligations, between your paycheck and your next payment, between stability and crisis. So what actually happens at 50,000? Your brain exits survival math. I know that sounds dramatic, but let me walk you through it practically. When you have $50,000 accessible, I mean in a high-yield savings account at Ally or Marcus or Wealthfront, somewhere you can reach it in 1 to 2 business days, here's what changes in your day-to-day psychology. First, you stop catastrophizing job loss. If you're spending $4,000 a month and you have $50K saved, that's over 12 months of runway. Your brain knows this, not consciously every day, but structurally in the background. The "what if I get laid off" anxiety that hums underneath everything? It goes quiet. Not silent, quiet. And quiet is enough to change how you show up at work, how you negotiate, how you respond to a bad boss or a toxic project. Second, and this one surprised me, you stop panic optimizing small expenses. I used to spend genuinely 2 hours a month comparing grocery prices, switching between Walmart pickup and Instacart and Costco, trying to save $40. And look, $40 matters when you're tight. But at $50K in savings, your brain lets go of that constant nickel and diming because it correctly assesses that your time is worth more than the optimization. You start making decisions based on time value, not just dollar value. That's a massive cognitive shift. Third, and this is the one that changes your income trajectory, you start taking calculated risks. You apply for the job that's a stretch. You say no to the freelance client who pays on time but underpays you by 30%. You invest the first $5,000 into that side project instead of keeping it as just-in-case money because you have $45,000 of just-in-case money still sitting there. I'll be real. I didn't start this channel. I didn't invest in the equipment, the software, any of it, until I had a cushion that made the risk feel survivable. Before that, every dollar felt too precious to bet on something that might not work. And I think most people with business ideas, creative projects, career pivots, they're stuck in the same place. Not because they lack ambition, because the math doesn't give them permission to take the shot. And here's what's wild. The people who look like they took a risk and it paid off? Go talk to them. Really ask them. Most of them had a cushion. A partner's income, family money, savings they'd built quietly for years. The mythology of the broke entrepreneur who risked it all is mostly mythology. People take smart risks from positions of quiet stability. 50K is that position for most people making under $100,000 a year. Actually, let me rephrase that. It's not that 50,000 is some magic number that unlocks a different brain. It's that 50,000 is roughly 12 to 15 months of expenses for the average person in this income range. And 12 to 15 months of runway is where the survival math finally stops running in the background. Now let me talk about why the space between 0 and 50,000 is so brutal. Because if you're in it right now, I want you to understand that it's not you. The first 10,000 takes the longest. It takes the longest because you're building it while you're also underfunded for emergencies, which means you keep getting knocked back. You save 2,000, the car breaks down. You save 3,000, your wisdom teeth decide it's time. You save 5,000, your roommate moves out and suddenly you're covering the full rent for 2 months while you find someone. Most people attempt the climb to 10K 3, 4, 5 times before it sticks. And every time you get knocked back to 1,000 or back to 0, it doesn't just cost you money, it costs you belief. You start thinking, I'm just not someone who saves. That thought isn't true, but it feels true because the evidence keeps confirming it. And the financial system isn't helping. Your checking account at Bank of America is paying you 0.01% on whatever you leave in there. Your credit card is charging you 26.9% on what you owe. The spread between what they charge you and what they pay you is the widest it's been in decades. You're trying to build a snowball while the sun is actively melting it. I'm saying this not to depress you. I'm saying it because if you're in that 0 to 10K stretch and feeling like it's unreasonably hard, you're right. It is unreasonably hard. The terrain gets easier after 10. It gets significantly easier after 25. And it transforms after 50. But that first stretch is uphill in sand, and acknowledging that isn't weakness, it's accuracy. So let's talk about actually getting there. Because I'm not going to spend 15 minutes explaining why 50K matters and then say, good luck. That would be useless. Here's what I've seen work, not in theory, not in a spreadsheet, but in actual human behavior for people making $50,000 to $90,000 a year with normal American expenses. The bridge from wherever you are now to $50,000 has 3 phases, and each phase requires a different strategy because your psychology is different at each level. Phase 1 is 0 to 10,000. In this phase, your only job is to make saving automatic, invisible, and non-negotiable. I mean truly automatic. Set up a transfer from your checking to a separate high-yield savings account at a different bank than your checking for the day after your paycheck hits. The amount almost doesn't matter at first. $200, $150, whatever doesn't make you overdraft. The different bank part is critical, and here's why. If your savings is sitting in the same Chase app as your checking, your brain counts it as spendable. It's right there. One tap. You see it every time you check your balance. I know this sounds like a small thing, but I moved my savings to Ally, which takes 1 to 2 business days to transfer back, and I went from dipping into savings every other week to I haven't touched it in 4 months, almost overnight. The friction is the feature. You want it slightly inconvenient to access. Phase 2 is 10 to 25,000. This is where you start seeing real momentum because you've broken the emergency cycle. You've got 10K. A flat tire doesn't wipe you out anymore. A surprise medical bill is annoying, not catastrophic. So now your savings actually gets to compound without constant interruption. In this phase, the move is to increase the automatic transfer every time your income changes. Get a raise? Bump the transfer by half the raise amount before you adjust your lifestyle. Pick up a side gig for a few months? Route 100% of that into savings. Sell stuff on Facebook Marketplace or OfferUp. Straight to savings. The goal is to take advantage of the fact that your expenses have already stabilized. You're used to living on what you're living on, and every new dollar goes straight to the gap between you and 50. And look, I'm not saying don't enjoy your life. Go to brunch. Get the DoorDash once in a while. Buy the thing you actually want. The difference is that in phase 2, you have enough margin that those things don't set you back to zero. You can spend and save simultaneously because the emergency cycle isn't eating your progress anymore. The psychological shift here is subtle but powerful. You go from saving means deprivation to saving is happening in the background while I live normally. That's the shift that makes it sustainable. Deprivation-based saving works for about 6 weeks, and then you blow it all on a target run and feel terrible about yourself. Background saving works indefinitely because it doesn't require willpower. If you know someone who's stuck in that 0 to 10K loop, or someone who's been beating themselves up about money, send them this video. You don't even have to say anything, just drop the link. And if this is hitting different than the usual finance advice, tap the like button. It's small for you, but it helps this reach the next person who needs to hear it. Phase 3, 25 to 50,000. This is where it gets fun, honestly, because at 25K, something interesting happens. You've already proven to yourself that you can do this. The identity shift has happened. You're no longer someone who can't save. You're someone with $25,000 in the bank. That's not nothing. That's more than most people your age have. In this phase, the strategy shifts from pure accumulation to optimization. You've got enough saved that the interest rate on your savings actually matters. The difference between 0.01% at Chase and 4.5% at a high-yield account is real money now. On $25,000, that's over $1,000 a year in interest you're either earning or leaving on the table. This is also the phase where you can start splitting your savings into buckets without it feeling pointless. Emergency fund stays at 6 months of expenses, maybe $24,000 if you're spending $4K a month. Everything above that is opportunity money, the fund that lets you take a calculated risk, put a down payment on something, invest in yourself, or cover a career transition. And here's the thing about phase 3 that surprises people. It goes faster than phase 1 and 2. Not just because you might be earning more by this point, but because you've stopped the behavioral leaks. You're not impulse buying on Amazon at 2 in the morning because that behavior faded somewhere around 15K when the scarcity pressure lifted. You're not stress spending on food delivery because the stress itself decreased. The psychological benefits of saving create a positive feedback loop that accelerates the saving itself. Now, I want to address something that might be bugging you. $50,000. That's easy to say. I'm dealing with student loans. I'm dealing with credit card debt. I'm dealing with a car payment. How am I supposed to save 50K when I owe 40? Fair. And I'm not going to insult you with just pay off your debt first and then save. That advice works on paper and fails in real life because if you drain every spare dollar into debt payoff with zero savings, the next emergency goes right back on the credit card and you're running in circles. Here's what actually works for people carrying debt and trying to build savings simultaneously. You do both, but you weight them differently depending on the interest rates. If your debt is above 20%, like most credit cards, you put 70% of your extra money toward that debt and 30% towards savings until you hit your emergency fund baseline, which is usually $3,000 to $5,000. Once you've got that floor, you can go more aggressive on the debt because the emergency fund catches you when life happens. If your debt is below 7%, like most student loans or a car loan on a decent rate, you can save more aggressively while making minimum payments on the debt because mathematically, building the savings cushion and getting the psychological benefits sooner has a higher total life impact than optimizing for interest rate arbitrage. I know some people will disagree with that. The pay off all debt first crowd is loud, but I've watched too many people pay off $30,000 in student loans while having zero in savings and then lose their job 6 months later with no cushion. Being debt-free and broke isn't the flex people think it is. Being debt-free with a cushion underneath you, that's stability. Here's the part that's hard to explain until you've felt it. I remember the week I looked at my savings account and it said $51,000 and change. I was sitting at my desk, middle of a Tuesday, opened the Ally app just to check something, and saw the number. And the feeling wasn't excitement. It wasn't celebration. It was, and I'm trying to find the right word here, quiet. Everything was quiet. The background hum of what if something goes wrong that had been running since I was 22, it just wasn't there. Not muted, gone. And I realized I hadn't made a single financial decision from fear in weeks, maybe months. I just hadn't noticed because the absence of anxiety is the hardest thing to notice. That week, my lease renewal came in 8% higher. Normally, that would have sent me into a spiral, frantically checking apartments, calculating whether I could swing it, feeling trapped. Instead, I just thought, that's annoying. I can either pay it or move. Both are fine. Both were fine. That's what $50K does. It doesn't make you rich. It makes both options fine. And that right there is the brain shift I'm talking about. It's not that you become a different person. It's that you have the room to actually be yourself, to make decisions based on what you want, not what you can barely afford, to think in years instead of weeks, to say no to things that don't serve you without the terror of, but what if I need that income? Let me zoom out for a second, because I think there's a bigger point here that gets lost in the numbers. The financial system in this country is optimized for the 0 to 10K loop. Credit card companies make their money on people who carry balances, which means they make their money on people without savings cushions, because those are the people who put emergencies on plastic. Banks make their money on overdraft fees and low balance accounts. The entire consumer finance infrastructure profits most from people who are close to the edge. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's just how the incentives work. No one sat in a room and said, let's keep people broke. But the system doesn't need intent to produce outcomes. If Chase makes $350 a year in overdraft fees from the average low-balance checking account, there's no structural incentive for them to help you build a $50,000 cushion. In fact, once you do, you become a less profitable customer for them. Think about that for a second. So when you feel like building savings is swimming upstream, you're not wrong. You are swimming upstream. The current is designed to keep you spending at the pace you earn, carrying just enough debt to stay profitable for someone else, and never building the cushion that would make you financially autonomous. Knowing that doesn't fix it, but it does something important. It takes the shame out. You didn't fail at saving because you're bad with money. You haven't built $50K yet because you're operating inside a system that structurally resists exactly that outcome. And every dollar you save anyway is a middle finger to that design. I mean, a polite middle finger, a financially responsible middle finger. So here's where we land. The $50,000 threshold isn't about $50,000. It's about what your brain becomes capable of when survival math stops running. Below $50K, or more precisely, below 12 to 15 months of expenses, your decision-making is filtered through scarcity. You make smaller choices, safer choices, choices that optimize for the next 30 days instead of the next 3 years. That's not a character flaw. That's rational behavior given the constraints. Above that line, your brain shifts from defense to offense. You start thinking about what you want to build instead of what you're trying to survive. You start evaluating opportunities instead of clinging to whatever's currently paying the bills. You stop saying yes to things out of fear and start saying yes to things out of genuine interest. And that shift from fear-based to choice-based financial behavior, that's what actually builds wealth over time, not the 50K itself. The 50K is the foundation that makes everything else possible. The career move, the investment, the business, the negotiation, the no. All of it becomes available once the survival math goes quiet. If you're at 0 right now, respect. You're in the hardest part. If you're at 10, you've already done the thing most people can't. If you're at 25, you're closer than you think, and the momentum is about to hit different. And if you're past 50 and nodding along because you recognize everything I just described, welcome to the quiet. It's nice here, right? One last thing before I let you go. The biggest mistake I see people make with a goal like this, and it's the mistake I made for 2 years, is treating it like a sprint. Calculating, if I save $1,500 a month, I'll be there in 33 months, and then burning out in month 4 because life isn't a spreadsheet. It took me close to 4 years. Not 33 months, 4 years, because I had setbacks, because I had months where I saved nothing, because I had a period where I pulled $8,000 out for something I couldn't avoid. And I still got there. Not because I was disciplined every single day, but because the system was automatic, and every time I got knocked down, the system kept going once I got back up. That's why I don't care how much you start with, 100 a paycheck, 200, 50. I genuinely don't care. What I care about is that it's automatic, it's at a separate bank, and you don't touch it unless the house is literally on fire. The amount scales up over time. The habit is what you're building first. So here's what I want you to do this week. Not this month, not eventually, this week. Open a high-yield savings account if you don't have one. Ally, Marcus, SoFi, Wealthfront, Capital One 360, any of them. Set up an automatic transfer for the day after your next paycheck. Start with whatever doesn't scare you, and then forget about it. Let the system run. Check it once a month if you want, but don't obsess over the number. The number will move, your brain will shift, and one random Tuesday, you'll open that app and feel the quiet. If you want to keep building on this, I've got a video on the exact high-yield savings setup I use and why the automation order matters. It's the practical how to the why we just covered. I'll link it right here. Drop a comment and tell me, where are you right now on the 0 to 50 scale, and what's been the biggest thing keeping you stuck? Not so I can judge, so I can make the next video about whatever's actually blocking you. I'll see you in the next one.